I needed an envelope. Modular is pretty great at plucky stuff. Plaits has an internal decay envelope, as does Basimilus. Maths is pretty great at ADSR envelopes, and especially again plucky stuff because of the exponential curve. But for melodic lines, pads, drones, anything that doesn't go pluck, I need an ADSR. Knowing Eurorack, there's bound to be something out there that does what I want, and then some. So here's the video I needed when looking for my ultimate envelope generator. Stages, Zadar, and Quadigy. All of these do ADSR, kind of, and a bunch of other things. So let's start with that simple, boring, yet always useful envelope we all know and love, the ADSR. Stages can seem daunting at first, but with a little messing around you'll understand quickly enough. Emily at Mutable Instruments really has a knack for taking existing concepts in synthesis, putting them apart and rearranging them into a deep yet intuitive interface. Every vertical column stands for one stage of an envelope, LFO or other signal. You connect a few of these together by patching a gate and output on the first of these. Then you set up the individual stages like this. Green, green, flashing red, and green, which is basically code for ADSR. Since Stages only has 6 stages in total, you can only use 1.5 ADSR, so to speak. So in this case, stage 3 to 6 are set up to control amplitude as an ADSR, and the 2 on the left control my filter with an AD envelope. The sliders control the expected functions: length for each stage, except sustain, which is basically a level control. The potentiometers above control curve, logarithmic to exponential. And in this case, the one above our sustain stage doesn't do anything. Let's look at Chaos Devices Zadar, or Zadar, whatever. Yeah, the company's name is pronounced Chaos, and yes, that still irks me. Zadar is based on preset shapes. These are organized per letter, and they kind of fit together based on that. For our ADSR envelope, we'll need one or more of the simpler shapes under A. Instead of controlling different stages of the eventual shape, you can do permutations of them. Length being the obvious one, from ridiculously fast to ridiculously slow. Then there's warp, and if you wiggle that back and forth, well, this happens. Response is similar to warp, but on the vertical axis. Now, what about the S of our ADSR? Well, instead of setting a level like usual, we have this vertical line to select a point in our shape to use as the sustain level. Then, depending on the preset shape you're using, either sustain or response acts most similar to a level control. Slightly different from usual, but pretty similar in use. Then there's Quadigy. This is the most regular of the bunch, but absolutely ridiculously powerful. We obviously have these sliders to control, well, exactly what you'd expect. But flicking through the menu a bit, we can change pre-delay, hold, punch, and global time. We have curve for every segment. And output level. We can change the trigger mode and a whole bunch of other controls. Let's compare. Stages does really any control signal you want to create. And the real-time control using the sliders and potentiometers, in my opinion, has everything you need. You can loop one or a few segments to create custom LFOs. Create anything from single decay envelopes, 6-step sequences, up to a huge ADSR envelope. Depending on how complicated you want to make it, you'll run out of stages soon. Get it? But worst case, you can buy a bunch of them and chain them together. Zadar's strength is really in the realm of more complicated shapes and their instant tweakability. I find that longer, evolving drones and pads benefit most from these unique modulations, and no other module can really do that. Quadigy is for whomever wants the ultimate perfect shape to their envelope. Having such extensive control over every minute portion of the sound can definitely help blending a lot of sounds together. Also, both Zadar and Quadigy have level controls for their output. For stages, you'll need to attenuate. Stages is simple. Whatever the slider does in your patch, that's what you can control. This means that you can control one thing about every stage, mainly their length. Zadar and Quadigy both need some programming to patch your CV input. Zadar has one input for every channel, Quadigy has two that are freely assignable. In the case of Zadar, you'll probably want to control either warp or length. Both do kind of similar things in practice, but warp just looks cooler. Quadigy has a more extensive matrix where you can assign CV in to multiple parameters at a time. The best instant gratification parameter though seems to be the global time. This will change the length of all parts of the envelope by the same relative amount. In Modular, any signal can be anything. You can use audio for modulation or modulation as audio. There's generally two ways to turn CV into audio. Either loop it and turn up the speed, or clock it with a square wave from an oscillator. You see, a square wave is basically a trigger signal happening at audio rate. If I use that to trigger stages, it'll play a pitch in perfect sync with my oscillator. This happens to be very similar to how oscillator sync works. Stages has a segment loop function, but I found it to not track full per octave, so this seems the best way to get some audio happening. Zadar is, in essence, a wavetable oscillator, but slower. If we loop the waveform like so, speed it up and set the CV in over speed to -48, we actually have quite a few interesting sounds to work with. For Quadigy, again, we need a square wave to trigger the oscillations, and it doesn't really sound like anything interesting. None of these modules is really better than another. They all have their strengths, and it kind of depends on your workflow which is best for you. Zadar and Quadigy both have 4 channels and a lot of control. They both need some menu diving to really get everything out of them. I'm not generally a fan of the kind of preset nature of Zadar, but it does really sound very good as an oscillator. For me personally, even though it has the fewest functions of them all, Stages wins. I like the instant control it offers over not many, but very well chosen functions. Modular is meant as my escape from the computer, so I want to avoid menu diving and programming as much as I can. But again, depending on your needs, you really can't go wrong with any of them.